Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 7th of October 2023. Sorry I'm a little bit late, one of my boys had a cup game football match, that's football with the feet match. Sorry, that's my dig at my American friends with their American football. Apologies, I take it back. Do I? No. So I'm a little bit late today, apologies. Let's get to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. And yes, these figures might be compiling data from, say, 3 days before due to OPSEC, due to the way that Ukraine compile these figures and the kind of protocols they have to go through in order to get them kind of rubber stamped by the General Staff. At least they have those kind of protocols. I'm not sure that Russia has. That Russia seems to just produce fanciful material when it comes to their statistics for Ukrainian losses, and that's why I don't report them. They are just, nuts. There is a much greater degree of credibility with the Ukrainian figures, and this is something we have seen over time. I've talked about Andrew Perpetua giving you video evidence for 15 of the losses in the Uruzhany area, and those were the claims that the Ukrainians made. 15 losses there, video evidence of 15 losses. It adds up. So we build this picture. I know I keep saying that, right? 610 personnel loss is a higher end of the range we've seen in the counter-offensive. Yeah, there've been a couple of days of 1,000, but realistically, it's been sort of between 350 and 640, that kind of area. And so I think this illustrates that there are some pretty heavy areas of activity. There have been, just to let you know, that Andrew Perpetua was talking about one of his sources telling him that around Bakhmut, around Klishchivka area south of Bakhmut, a Ukrainian source to him reported really heavy Ukrainian casualties. And you think, oh, that's bad. And he said, but the Russian casualties were catastrophic. So there are heavy losses for both sides, but for the Russians, really heavy losses. That's just in the Bakhmut area. Then we have what's going on elsewhere. 23 tanks and 20 armored personnel vehicles and 22 artillery systems are high numbers in each of those categories. Yes, we've seen 40 days of 40-odd artillery systems getting taken out in a single day, and that is truly, again, to use that word, catastrophic for the Russians on a single day. But 22 is still really bad. You can take 20% of these figures and you're still going to have terrible numbers for the Russians. 23 tanks in one day is terrible. 20 armored personnel vehicles, including MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers. That's a bad day. Bad day at the office. So I think the Russians are losing equipment like this, heavy equipment hand over fist, and that is not a good look. In terms of personnel losses, we are seeing Mediadzona, who are doing the work with the BBC to work at BBC Russia to work out the absolute benchmark where you can benchmark the total minimum losses of Russian soldiers. They are doing this work that I've talked about a lot previously, where they're sifting through all the social media in Russia to find out the claims of people dying, obituaries that definitely connect it to the war. So even if there's a soldier who's died, but it doesn't say in the social media post that soldier died as a result of the war, then they don't include it. It's quite tight criteria for this, and they have now upped their numbers to 33,900. Now that's a long way off 281,700. There's still arguments as to what this means, and we've moved from liquidated personnel to just calling them personnel. So does that include casualties? And that the BBC seem to think it does include casualties, as in wounded. Other people say no, it's definitely dead, and these arguments will go on. Nonetheless, the absolute bare minimum of the range of Russian dead is 33,900, and that won't include certain categories. So I don't know that includes DPR and the LPR, so the militias working within Ukraine that are from those regions, the Luhansk and the Donetsk regions. So anyway, through open source research, Mediadzona, a Russian independent media outlet, together with BBC Russia, confirmed the names of 33,904 killed since the beginning of the war. That is a big, and as it says, does not even include 20,000 plus Wagner killed in Bakhmut, or the 20,000 killed in other areas of the theatre. So that's Wagner to be added onto that, and that's DPR and LPR to be added on as well. So it's significant. Now, there's a lot of POWs being taken here. We've got a bunch being taken near Bakhmut. These are Russian POWs, and we heard a claim. I think I talked about a Russian source saying that they'd had POWs taken in Bakhmut, and then straight away, like a dozen were taken. Then here we have pretty much a dozen here. So I think this footage refers back to the claims yesterday. So that kind of matches up, which is good. There were also claims that the Russians themselves took some POWs, which is quite rare. You need to be on the attack to take POWs, really. And although the Russians do these counterattacks, you don't hear as many instances of Ukrainians becoming POWs at the moment. I know it's happened a lot in the past, but that has happened north of Klishchiivka as well. Right. So when we're now looking at these equipment categories, 23, 20, 22, you're thinking, okay, are these accurate? And then you go and find out, and, you know, we can go to 58 vehicles and fuel tanks. Okay, that's huge. 27 drones. Okay, we can forget that. That'll be from a couple of nights ago. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 2 multiple launch rocket systems. That's going to hurt the Russians. I don't know what that is, that anti-aircraft warfare system, how high value that is. 5 pieces of special equipment. That's generally going to be ISR, but it can be other stuff as well. So intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. Right. So you got huge logistics vehicles, huge numbers of logistics vehicles being taken out, and huge numbers of other stuff. Okay, let's see what we can do to try and justify these numbers. Well, actually, Eskadrones released footage of what can only be described as a Ukrainian GUR-FPV drone rampage through the Russian front and rear areas around Bakhmut. Now, this is interesting because if you look at these are all logistics vehicles. So when you go back to the figures of 58 lost in one day, you're thinking that's massive. Surely you can't lose that many in one day. And then you just got one montage bit of footage from one area of the whole front line, and it has 7 observation posts and positions, 4 communications nodes, 8 cars, 10 vans, 7 Bukankers. So these are all logistics. 1 BTR-80, that's your military vehicle, and a Kamaz truck, right? And you're thinking, where are the heavy vehicles? Well, this is Bakhmut, remember, where there are very few heavy vehicles being used. Traditionally, over the war, like Wagner really didn't use any tanks, IFVs or APCs, particularly in this area. So traditionally, I say traditionally, like it's a tradition, but over the course of the war, this has been an area where you haven't seen that, and so therefore you would expect if you're going to destroy a lot of stuff, it will be more of your logistical stuff or stuff like self-propelled guns, self-propelled mortars, those kind of things. But if you want heavy vehicles, heavy equipment, I mean, look at this. This is in Luhansk region. This is 2 square kilometers, apparently. 11 units just destroyed in 2 days. So you got 2 T-90 tanks, 1 destroyed, 1 abandoned. That's the best Russian tank. 1 T-80B, 5 T-72B3s, 1 T-72B, 1 MLRS Grad, and something that can't be identified. 11 bits of kit, like serious bits of kit in 2 square kilometers. Yes, that's a lot of money's worth of kit, but that's a lot of capability just taken out from the Russians. That's a huge degradation of their forces just in that one area. So then you go back to these numbers and you think, okay, are they realistic? Well, yeah, they're looking pretty realistic. Then you go to Andrew Perpetua. Now he says, because the ratio is so overwhelmingly in favor of the Ukrainians here, he says, these are the losses I could identify today. For the record, 39 Russian and 35 Ukrainian sources were used to compile this specific list. Right? Russian sources tend to post airstrikes and missile strikes, while Ukrainians post mostly FPV drones. Now, what you're seeing a lot of, the Russians are having huge amounts of success in airstrikes. They are having some drone success, but actually not in the last 24 hours, particularly, as you can see from this list. And you are seeing some strikes in the rear of the Ukrainian lines, and we'll come on to that in a second. But let's just look at equipment here, because this is a phenomenally bad day for the Russians compared to the Ukrainians. You have 1 tank that's hit a mine. Don't know what tank it was, but that's taken out by a mine. And then all of these. So you got some artillery. You got a few tanks, IFVs and APCs, and then trunks. You've just got trucks. You've just got a huge amount of trucks and civilian vehicles to signify those logistics issues that the Russians are going to be facing, and reflecting the 58 vehicles and fuel tanks lost as according to the general staff figures. It's just huge. And then we look down the reason that they were taken out. It's FPV drone dropped grenade. almost all of these, apart from an APC getting taken out by a grenade launcher, almost all of these are FPV drones. That's the importance. And then we can join these dots up, because actually there, and we'll come to this later, I think I've got it in my military aid bit, but you have a massive number of drones being delivered to Ukraine at the moment by drone. I don't know where that is actually. Do you know what? I am going to go and find it, because it is that important. Yeah, so here it is. We have the claims of Army of Drones, which is United 24, this whole fundraising thing that's raised $350 million or probably more now. Army of Drones has sent almost 2,000 Autel Evo Max 40 drones with artificial intelligence to the front. Every week, large-scale batches of drones are sent to the front. Only last week, the soldiers hit 220 units of Russian equipment. As part of the Army of Drones initiative, the Ukrainian armed forces will receive 1,912 of these. These drones are intended for reconnaissance of enemy positions in the deep rear and for adjusting artillery, and we're going to look at some of the hits that these sort of drones have made. I've already shown you some, but we'll see one particularly impressive hit. This is the kind of capability that I think the Ukrainians have, and they have that asymmetrical advantage over the Russians. Still, we can see Russians using FPV drones a lot more than they were, and that there was talk about the Ukrainians having a 6-month lead time over the Russians in that respect. So the Russians have caught up, but I just don't think they have the sheer mass of drones. So they might have the capability in certain areas, but the capacity compared to the Ukrainians with this kind of money and support is huge. 1,700 plus birds. This is from Mikhailo Fedorov. From the Army of Drones are heading to the front line. These are Ukrainian-made as well as foreign drones used by NATO countries. Also, there is a batch of secret birds, secret drones that have already shown results. Every day, we keep sending drones to our heroes, scaling up production. This is hugely important, and this then translates into that. Honestly, it's just a huge problem for the Russians. I said to you months back that when you heard that there had been 10,000 drone operators trained by the United 24, the Army of Drones initiative, this would make a massive difference. And you could have a situation where there were just, clouds of drones in the sky. Well, not quite like that, but this is basically coming to fruition. My predictions, I think, are fairly on the money here. The problem is, they need to do this an awful lot more for several months until if that is being lost every day, then take 2 more months of that, and you will have such an attrition of the Russian equipment that the Ukrainian forces would be ready to move in terms of taking territory, in terms of troops and infantry. You've already got to a point where some drone operators are struggling to find targets in certain places, and they're maybe having to move back, so on and so forth. So really impressive statistics there for the Ukrainians. Now, the Russians are having success themselves. So in the last week, a couple of training establishments have been hit behind the line. So here, dozens of Ukrainians wiped out, along with foreign instructors, apparently. Yesterday, certainly the Ukrainians lost a lot of people here. Yesterday, a massive accumulation of troops and foreign instructors was erased by an airburst strike on a training ground near Kucherov Yar, about 50 kilometers deep into the Ukrainian rear. Experimental means of reconnaissance were used in this strike, and according to Russian sources, the foreign instructors had just arrived to prepare the personnel of the 77th Airmobile Brigade of Ukraine. I can't talk to the details there, but there's quite a few people here, and basically a massive explosion. I can't show it to you, but the video does show just a big old explosion there that would have been catastrophic for those people. And so the Ukrainians do take losses, but I don't think that they're taking losses in different ways. I think there's 2 bases or 2 training areas that have been hit. The Ukrainians hit the Russians as well. I have seen a video evidence. I've not got it here, but you can go and find it. The Ukrainians did hit a training establishment similar to this. I just don't think they took out as many people. Andrew Perpetua talked about this last night. So there is an advantage there in terms of losses over the last week from deep rear hits by the Russians over the Ukrainians. Now, here is a hit that's really, I think, significant, well, possibly in a way. maybe more in a PR way, but it's reported that an FPV drone damage to the latest Russian 120mm Flox self-propelled gun, which according to the Russians can be both a self-propelled mortar and an artillery system, has taken place. This should be a prototype which has not yet gone into serial production. There's been a couple of these. I don't know whether this is the same one. It probably is, because I can't think they'd have more than one vehicle. But there was a video that came out just the other day of, I'm meant to have it on my military aid list, so it's obviously got lost in my notes, but it was a new Russian vehicle, which you can see here, and that was of real surprise because they're producing. Obviously, this is a long time in the making, right? It wouldn't just be that they've produced something new, designed something new within the time range of this war, but they have produced this new bit of kit, and there was some pretty swanky footage coming out of it. Well, it appears that prototype that is shown in that swanky footage has been taken out by a drone. I don't know how much damage was done, whether it's destroyed or just bounced off it or whatever, because as an FPV drone without a spotter drone, it cuts out as soon as it gets into terminal range, and it hits, and that's the end of that. So we can't tell what happened, but the fact that the prototype has been here makes you wonder where that drone was, where the vehicle was. Would it have been that near to the front line? Would they risk that? It's been targeted by a Ukrainian or a pro-Ukrainian drone. Is there a bit of intelligence? Is subterfuge going on? Partisan activity? Don't know, but I think that's a really significant hit there. Here we have, I'm not going to show it, but they're absolutely spectacular. You can go and check out all the links to these below. To my first video of the day, I always put the links below because I get demonetized if I show you this stuff. But if you want to watch it, check it out. And also go to Discord server. Thank you publicly to Grimsoft, who has sorted out my Discord server. He's the expert there. I'm clueless. He's a legend. Thank you. Spectacular destruction of the Russian TOS-1 220mm MLRS as a result of a HIMARS strike. So the reason I've included this, not only is it spectacular, but you're not going to see that, but it is a HIMARS being used for a single piece of equipment, which we're seeing an awful lot of. I know I keep saying that, and that one cooks off big time. Big old explosion. Right. Yet again, the Russians have hit their own air force. They have taken out one of their jets yesterday near Mariupol. Russian Air Force affiliated channel Fighter Bomber suggests that again a Russian fighter was shot down by friendly fire. At this rate of work of our valiant air defense, we will soon be left without aviation, the channel states, which is like pretty damning indictment there. Other Russian channels are also reporting it, so it's pretty sure it happened, and indeed that's a footage supposedly of the crash site. So don't know what jet that was. And then something that we've seen before that has happened a number of times, actually. Most recently, I was reading about a water that was poisoned, but I don't know that anything came about of it, and I think they arrested someone that they thought did that. Anyway, here we have an unknown someone's got away with poisoning 11 Russian invaders. So according to sources in the local police, an unknown woman poisoned 11 of their personnel, and the incident took place several days ago. 11 fighters died after drinking poisoned alcohol this time. So that is good sort of partisan activity that is going to be causing the Russians to. It will have a psychological effect, surely, behind the lines, as well as having a meaningful effect in degrading their forces, at least somewhat. Right, we're just going to pop into, before we go on to the long distance strikes, we're going to pop into Andrew Perpetua, who talks about, I mean, this is concerning more distance strikes, concerning the Russian airstrikes that have been taking place, and also the hits on say the hospital in Berislav the other day, that Solid Foe Life, a Russian kind of troll, pro-Russian troll at least, kind on my threads that it's not a problem, it had been evacuated. And of course, kind of ignoring the hit on the village that took out, in the 50s, maybe 58 people, 52 to 58 people were killed. Although he didn't actually fully ignore it, he justified that it was a funeral of someone in the army, so that's okay then. The fact that you see the dead bodies of all these civilians, that's fine. Anyway.
And there were bomb strikes in Berislav that struck the hospital. Now, I want to say, because I found this incredibly offensive, there are people who are spreading this propaganda that all of the towns on the river are abandoned because Ukraine put out an evacuation order. That's simply not true. It's not true. They're not abandoned. Civilians do live there. Okay. Ukraine did tell people to leave, but that doesn't mean people left. And Ukraine doesn't force people to leave against their will. The order to leave is a suggestion. It's basically a strongly worded letter, okay? It's not like they come to your house and arrest you if you stay, okay? The people are still there. So attacking these towns is attacking civilians. It's that simple. They've been attacking Kherson regularly with this shelling, wounding and killing people on a regular basis. They've been bombing all of these towns. They've been bombing hospitals, bombing civilians trying to leave. They claim, and that's kind of the irony here, is that the other day they dropped a bomb on civilians. The civilians who survived got into cars and tried to drive away, and then they shelled the road that they were driving on so they couldn't leave. And one of the women suffered shrapnel wounds to her spine, okay? And then the people say, oh, these settlements are abandoned. It's ridiculous.
Andrew Perpetua is pretty angry at the moment with the way that the Russians are acting, both in the information space, but just what they're doing in terms of hammering places. So, you know, Tim, we heard about Kharkiv being hit, and then I reported the video. I did my video yesterday where I was really angry, and then after that video, literally they continued doing it through the day. So Tim White's like, goodness me, another attack on civilians in Kharkiv to report. 76-year-old man and 75-year-old woman were disabled, and a disabled 25-year-old woman all suffered carbon monoxide poisoning and are hospitalized after a rocket attack on residential buildings in the border village of Vovchansk. Right? So you're thinking, why are you targeting a place like that? And then it went on. You know, guess what? Yet another bombing in Kharkiv region, just 3 to 4 kilometers from the massacre in Hroza. So that's where those people died at the wake, at the grocery store, at the cafe. This time, Russia's army has fired on Shevchenkiva. One person was injured here, and the village was hit by rockets from a Tornado multiple launch rocket system. So that's like a sort of HIMARS equivalent, if it's the one with the guided rockets. But I don't know whether that's the case on that. There are different types of Tornado ones. But anyway, this is just what they're doing, the Russians, and that's why I had that whole emotional outburst yesterday, and anger with Russia and the Russian army is just so infuriating. Just terrible war crimes, and anyone that supports that, as I say, is justifying war crimes, and you know, they're honestly just as bad. Well, he says, honestly, reading the news today is just depressing. This was yesterday. Kharkiv is the most public and obvious attack on civilians, but there are many more than just Kharkiv. And you know, he tracks them all, and he's getting pretty worn down by the continued approach of Russia to attacking civilians. And again, last night, Russia strikes Odessa Oblast with Onyx anti-ship missiles, supersonic anti-ship missiles. These are cruise missiles that can't really be shot down by the Ukrainians, or at least you'd need probably something like the Patriot to do so. And they get through much more routinely, but they're not very accurate. Anyway, Odessa being hit here, and it looks like residential areas have been hit at least, but also more. So a big attack on Odessa with the Onyx anti-ship missiles. Ukraine says they were launched from the missile complex Bastion, located in occupied Crimea. A boarding house and a granary at the port have been hit, with 4 injuries reported. So that's the boarding house hit, but a granary too. So it's hitting food for the world, but also just civilians. It's unacceptable, isn't it? But that is the Russians for you. Right, okay. Now we're going to go to... Now, I am Legend of the Universe, as you all know. I awarded that to myself because it turns out that Kadyrov can just award himself Hero of Chechnya. Well, actually, he's passed Hero of Chechnya on to someone else today. I wonder who that is, someone who's been really heroic. Who is it? Oh, Kadyrov's son Adam, who beat up a prisoner in Grozny pre-trial detention center. So that's a video you can go and see, which I've seen a number of times, of him just kicking the heck out of a prisoner that he accuses of burning a Quran. But yeah. Anyway, his son was awarded the title of hero. I mean, he can't even stand still after he's being, he's not particularly a military person, is he? Anyway, he gets Hero of Chechnya. Chechen Minister of National Policy, External Relations, Press and Information, Ahmed Dudayev, said. So I think it's either going to be JR, isn't it, or it's going to be Grimsoft for Discord server, Matt Discord server. Someone's going to get Legend of the Universe. I can't give it to myself again, can I? Probably can, actually, because, I make the rules with Legend of the Universe, because that's what he does with the Hero of Chechnya. But I'm not that self-serving, so Grimsoft, yay, Team Grimsoft. JR, Team JR. Who's it going to be? I don't know. Legend of the Universe. Watch out, guys. It could be you. Okay. Right. A lot has happened overnight, or in fact today, with regard to Hamas. Israel has said that they have called it a state of war now. So there is war. Borders have been broken down. 5,000 rockets, is it, have been sent into Israel from from Palestine, from the Gaza Strip, and it is all going off, and there's some absolutely terrible footage of what can only be described as terrorists going into Israeli cities and just gunning down civilians. It is pretty terrible. How it pertains to Ukraine is that Russians seem to be gleefully rejoicing about this on social media. So Russian social media users taking a break from reveling in the mass death of Ukrainian civilians are currently reveling in the mass death of Israeli Jews because they left Russia and because they believe Jews did much harm to the world. It's just a sociopathic country, says Jimmy Rushton. Well, there's a lot of this going on. Wagnerites are now enjoying this moment as well. Look at the reactions, says Dimitri from War Translated. So what you might have, I wonder, is more empathy or sympathy for the Ukrainian position if stuff like this continues and the Israelis find out about it. Because what Ukraine need from Israel are, Iron Dome kind of air defense would be wonderful, but probably not the right thing for the right job here. They could do with Israeli tanks. They could do with anything from Israel. They're such a militarily adept country. And so any excuse for Israel to support Ukraine more would be welcome, but you don't really want it. You don't want something as terrible as what's happening there. You don't want that to happen so that Ukraine gets more kind of support. I don't know, but it's terrible what's happening in Israel. We'll have to see how that pans out. And finally today, a few people reached out to me privately to say, can you make some comment on Andrew Mikado and the Enforcer and what's going on with this big spat within the pro-Ukrainian community? And I said, look, I have to be perfectly honest, right? I'm so busy, right? And I only have a few kind of pro-Ukrainian sources that I regularly look at, Darian Gerdes, Professor Gerdes, and, Ukraine Matters I'll dip into, reporting from Ukraine, so on and so forth. There's just certain others I've never watched before. And I'd never watched Andrew Mikado. I'd heard the name, and the Enforcer, I think I'd heard the name maybe, but don't know anything about them. And so Andrew Mikado released this video saying, look, people like Jake Bro have come out and supported me in this big spat that involves a legal attack from one to the other, and other people have remained silent. And he had mentioned that there had been this copyright thing that myself and Combat Veteran Reacts had. So I felt by implication, by extension, I was, why am I being silent about this? The reason I was being silent is because I didn't have a Scooby-Doo what was going on, didn't have a clue. So I've reached out to Andrew Mikado. I've never watched any videos from either channel, like never before, and I'm sorry for that. But I only have so much time, right? So anyway, I watched kind of what's going on, and you can go to Andrew Mikado and find out from his point of view what's going on by looking at his video on Twitter. His channel has had 3 copyright strikes, which means that's the end of his channel. It's gone, or it's on the way. It's got 7 days, and then it's wrapped up. He's being legally challenged by this other pro-Ukrainian channel that he accuses them of being grifters. and that's the Enforcer channel. I don't know anything about them, but there is a big old argument going on between these two. I reached out to Andrew Mikado saying, look, I don't know what I can do, but if me or my community can support you, then I don't know. But you guys go and check out, first of all, what you think. If you don't know what's happening, go and check out what's happening. Look at the to and fro between these two. But the fact that this guy, actions speak louder than words, right? This guy's in Ukraine at the moment delivering aid himself that he has raised. He's raised a whole bunch of money and he's gone over to Ukraine and he's done that. So as far as I'm concerned, this guy is a good human being. And that tells me most of what I need to know. But I don't know everything, right? But that tells me an awful lot. And I don't know what else I can say or do about this, but I will be following it a little bit to make sure that, well, I mean, if he gets deplatformed, as a result of a legal case that has no basis, and all those copyright infringements strikes are coming from the other channel attacking him for copyright, if they are disingenuous, then that is horrific, because here's a guy that's using that platform to do good for Ukraine, and he will therefore be unable to do that good for Ukraine going forward, or at least not nearly as easily. And so that's absolutely terrible. But again, I don't want to get myself into legal quagmire here. I'm somewhat ignorant of these issues, but I have reached out to him. I suggest you guys do so as well and give him support if you think that he warrants that support, and he does look like a decent guy. I hate stuff like this. I mean, it's not my thing. These kind of intra community wrangles. I've been on the side of some of these before in certain communities I've been on, and it's just not. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. But this guy seems like a really nice dude. So I will look into this further. I suggest you do so as well. Anyway, take care, everybody. Speak soon. I'm going to do, I think, a live for my second part. I've got Matthew coming online to do that with me as well. So keep an eye out for a live on my ATP Geopolitics channel. This one, I'll see which channel this might go out on. I don't know yet. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.